Hello everyone and welcome to a new Unity scripting tutorial, and in this video we're going to try to replicate the way that the preview of a prefab works in Unity. I got a question about this yesterday and it sounded pretty interesting, so I wanted to make a video about it. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at how the previewer works and then try to replicate that interaction. So let's first make a cube and then pull it onto our assets folder, and this is the preview for the prefab. So if we click on the object and rotate left and right, we rotate around the up axis of the object, and then if we rotate or if we move the mouse up and down, we rotate onto the right axis of our camera, and that's pretty much what we want to do. You'll notice that on the up and down rotation the object locks, so it doesn't keep rotating, and that's gonna be interesting later on in the video. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is create our script. We'll create a C# script. We'll call this one preview object, and once that's created, we're gonna pull it onto our cube. Now let's open this up and move this here. The first thing that we can do is remove our start because we don't need it for anything. And we will need two variables. The first one will be a vector3 called prev position, which is the previous position of our mouse in the last frame. So let's initialize this one as vector3.0. And we will also need a vector3 called position or pos delta. And pos delta is going to be the change in position of the mouse from last frame to this frame. So let's start this one off being vector3.0 as well. And now to move on to our update. So we only want to move the object if the mouse button is held down. Let's start by creating an if statement. We'll say input.getMouseButton at 0, and mouse button at 0 is just the left mouse button, and then position delta. So our change in position is going to be equal to input.mousePosition minus previous position. So our change in position will be our current position minus the last frame's position. But we still need to update this previous position value. What we'll do is update it all the way at the end of the update function. So over here, right before the exit bracket, we'll say previous position is going to be equal to input.mousePosition, and that will be it. Now, we have our two variables that we declared here. We have values attached to them now, and we can move on to rotating our object. The first thing that we're going to do is try to rotate the object around the left and right motion of the mouse. So this motion right here, this one right here. So to do that, we're always rotating around the object's local up vector. If I click on the object here, that up vector is the green vector right here. You'll notice that if we're rotating this way, we're rotating around the up vector, pointing upwards here. If we move the mouse, the object so that it's pointing upwards, it still rotates on the up vector. And that's why it's rotating this way in the previewer. And to do this, we're going to say transform.rotate around transform.up, which is the local up vector of our object. And now the amount. The amount of rotation will be vector3 dot of position delta and camera dot main dot transform dot right. And this will happen in space dot world. And to explain this a little bit, what we're doing is pretty much just taking the mouse's change in position and projecting it onto the camera's transform.right. And this way, our rotation is not locked to only having the camera sitting at the same orientation as the world. So we can move the camera around or look at the object in a different angle, and our rotation should still work properly. And then space.world is because we want to rotate the world in we want to rotate the object in world space, not local. Now let's test this out and see if the object is rotating left and right. First we need to see the object on the screen, so let's move it down to the 0, 0, 0 position, and then let's run our game. And if we move left and right, you'll notice that it's inverted, and all we need to do is to fix that is to just add a negative right here. So we inverted the amount that we're rotating by, and then if we run this, we can move it left and right, and as you can see, it's rotating properly. Now, to move on to the up and down movement of the mouse, what we're going to do is to do transform.rotate, but this time around we're going to be rotating around the camera .main.transform.right. And I'll explain in a second why we're using the camera's right vector instead of the object's local right vector. And then the amount will be roughly the same idea as here, so it's going to be vector3 dot of m position delta and camera dot main dot transform dot up. And why we're using up is pretty much so if you do the trig for this, it's exactly like doing sine and cosine, but we're using just the dot product instead. So for one we're using the camera right, and the other one will be the camera up. Now for the space, it'll be the same thing, so space dot world. And now we can test this out. So let's go back to Unity and run this. And as you can see, we can move left and right, and then up and down works as well. And that should roughly work the same way that the previewer works, but you'll notice that it's not locking on the up and down rotation, kind of like how this does it here, where it locks on up and down. And the side effect of this is that if we move it up and then the axis is now inverted, so if the axis is pointing down and we try to rotate, you'll notice that the rotation is inverted as well. And that's something we can fix with an if statement. So if the object is pointing upwards, it's rotating properly. If it's pointing downwards, it's inverted. So what we can do to test for this is go back to our code and say, so right under the position delta, we can say if vector3 dot between our transform dot up and vector3 dot up, so the world's up. If the dot product between these two is more than or equal to 0, what we want to do is to take what we were doing here and keep it the same. So we just moved our left and right rotation to be inside this if statement. Else, all we need to do is to take this exact same thing but invert it, and exactly like what we did last time, we just remove our negative sign, and that will pretty much be it to invert the rotation. So if we go back to Unity and run it, so right now it's right side up, so that should work fine, and then once it's flipped upside down, that should also work fine. And that pretty much fixes the issue with the locking here. If you want to lock it, you can just lock it on that axis and then it will work exactly like the preview. But I thought that being able to rotate the object whichever way that we want is probably a lot more useful. And yeah, that pretty much works the exact same way that the previewer works. I really hope that this video helped. This video was suggested by a viewer, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Just leave me a comment and I'll look into it and see if I can make a video about it. But if you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, please leave them below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.